Well, let's turn to the UK election. The Conservative Party is fully imploding and Labor, by all accounts, is set for a landslide victory. What's not certain is the future of the opposition. With Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party set to be smashed at the polls, is Nigel Farage about to become the main opposition? Farage is promising to axe net zero, introduce mandatory life sentences for drug dealers, freeze non-essential immigration, pull the UK out of globalist bodies like the World Health Organization, and reject the influence of the World Economic Forum. Let's bring in Spiked Online Editor Tom Slater. Tom, thanks for joining me. A fascinating time in UK politics. Just before we get to Farage, you've described the Tories as a pointless husk, which is a bit full on. How is it the Tories have lost so much of the British population's confidence?
Well, I think that the Tories, in the wake of Brexit, had a golden opportunity to kind of remake themselves. For a very long time, it wasn't clear what they were for, who they were for. But because of Brexit in 2019 and Boris Johnson, they suddenly had this new working class base. That was the one chance for renewal, and they completely blew it. They reverted to backstabbing type. They let everyone and his dog have a go at being leader of the Conservative Party, leader of the country, after they got rid of Boris Johnson. And they completely forgot the voters, those working class voters in the Midlands of the North who put them there. So I do kind of think they deserve everything they're getting at this point. And whilst I understand the concerns about what a huge Labour landslide might mean for our civil liberties, for our country, I think it's fair to say that the Tories have brought this on themselves, including the Farage Insurgency, which I'm sure we're going to come on to as well.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you've pointed out how bad the Conservatives are, but obviously Farage is pretty good and winning favour amongst people. Some of the policies I mentioned in the introduction there, is that what is sort of making headway? Are those sorts of things resonating with your average Brit, or is something else going on for Farage?
Well, I think that the primary thing that he's tapped into is concerns about immigration. And this is something which obviously both of the two main parties, Conservatives and Labour, have terrible records on as far as voters are concerned. And he's very much tried to frame this as the immigration election in a situation in which neither parties wanted to talk about it too much. That's been very effective. I think also he's been a beneficiary of the fact that there is a very anti-politics mood at the moment. It's something that has benefited the Labour Party, but I think a lot of 2019 voters in particular who were thinking of either not voting, sitting on their hands, maybe some of them would go back into the Labour column, have now got something which more aligns with what it is they want to vote for. And I think regardless of what you think of Farage, I think particularly for those of us who are having to cover this, even his worst enemy would admit that he's livened things up. Up until this point, we were faced with the most deathly dull kind of competition between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, who are essentially two competing flavours of blancmange. So I think, aside from anything else, it has stirred up a genuine debate about the future of the country, which would have been completely absent had he not thrown his hat into the ring so emphatically a week or two ago.
When you say that voters there are faced with two pretty bland options, I was watching the debates and I had to laugh when Rishi Sunak was asked, tell us something about yourself that will make people like you again, which must have been incredibly humiliating. Hey, we've only got a little bit of time left, but I wanted to quickly ask you about Keir Starmer, who obviously will likely be the next UK Prime Minister. You called him the slipperiest, most unprincipled politician the UK has seen in many years, and possibly the most slippery PM the UK will ever have had. In 30 seconds, why do you say that? Tell us about him.
He has U-turned on essentially everything, every issue you could imagine. You could talk about Brexit, you could talk about women's rights, you could talk about the gender issue, you could talk about the environment, any of these questions. He does just point whichever way the wind is blowing. And I think that's a big problem in a democracy. When you vote in a politician, you hope to know what they stand for. And even at this point, we have no clue where Keir Starmer is, unfortunately.